Alarms continued to screech through the hive's corridors, their frequencies pulsing with urgency. The walls, once dim and humid, now throbbed with an angry bioluminescence, like the hive itself sensed the death of its warlord. Every node and tendril vibrated with the agitation of a living fortress reacting to trauma. The Zarn didn't build ships or bases. They grew them, and this one was waking up angry. Voss reloaded with mechanical precision, slamming a fresh mag into the repeater and nodding once to Drex. The two didn't need a briefing. They didn't have time for strategy. It was instinct now. Get out. Fast. Drex pointed toward the ascending ducts they had passed earlier. That vertical shaft could link up to the launch vanes. Maybe we can jack an emergency pod. Move, Voss said. They sprinted through the corridor, footsteps echoing sharply, breath hot and tight in their chests. Behind them, the clatter of approaching limbs grew louder. The Zarn were coming not in scattered patrols now, but as a wave, dozens, maybe more. Hive-born, spliced for speed and aggression, programmed with one purpose: kill the intruders. At the shaft, Drex grabbed the edge and swung himself upward, catching a metal ridge and pulling hard. Voss followed, moving with silent efficiency. The shaft was narrow, lined with vents that exhaled chemical mist. Every meter they gained brought them closer to the hive's surface and the possibility of survival. They emerged into a secondary hangar, barely lit, walls lined with what looked like pulsating seed pods and decommissioned drones. A maintenance crawler sat near the far bulkhead, open cockpit, old but intact. That fly? Drex asked, already running toward it. Voss was checking the drone ports. Long enough. He slid into the co-pilot seat, fingers moving over alien interfaces with grim familiarity. The crawler had been modified for Zarn anatomy. Clawed digits, dual brain coordination, but Voss had fought enough of their kind to memorize the layout. A few adjustments, and the controls began to glow. Drex climbed in, slammed the canopy shut, and braced himself as the crawler lurched into motion. Its propulsion system whined in protest, but it moved. Fast enough. Rear cameras, Voss said. Drex pulled the feed into his HUD. The hangar doors had burst open. At least 40 Zarn poured in, some bounding along the walls, others crawling at unnatural angles. He didn't recognize their ranks, but the muscle tone, plating density, and augmented limbs told him enough. Killers. They're not sending fodder, Drex muttered. They know we killed their alpha. The crawler shot through a tunnel that curved sharply upward, light increasing as they neared the surface. Voss kept one hand on the guidance stick, the other hovering near the weapon's matrix, though the crawler wasn't built for combat. Its frame still held mining lasers and collision-grade plating. Boost ready, he said. The outer gate loomed ahead, a circular maw that had begun to close in reaction to the breach. Organic muscles tensed around the frame, trying to seal the launch artery. Voss didn't blink. Hang on. He hit the booster. The crawler rocketed forward, sparks showering as it scraped past a narrowing exit. The edge of the gate sliced a gash into its undercarriage, but the vehicle broke free, exploding out of the hive like a bullet from a gun. They soared over a glacial ravine, wind shrieking around the hull, snow blasting in sheets across the viewport. Below, black forms emerged from the ice, more Zarn waiting, advancing, hissing as they saw the Terran crawler arc overhead. Drex keyed the emergency beacon. This is Shadow Recon. Call sign whispers 2, requesting immediate extraction. Coordinates incoming. Hostile biomass compromised. Repeat, hostile biomass compromised. Static. Then, acknowledged whispers 2. Locking signal. ETA 6 minutes. Drex exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. They heard us. Voss didn't answer. He was still scanning the terrain, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. He didn't trust 6 minutes. 6 minutes was a lifetime when hunted. From the rear camera, Drex saw movement again. Flyers, small skeletal Zarn bioforms, were rising from the hive's dorsal slits, thin wings vibrating like hummingbirds, eyes glowing crimson. 6 of them. Then 9. They're launching interceptors. I see them. The crawler had no air-to-air capability. Not against this many. Not fast enough. We land and dig in. Drex asked, his hand gripping the sidearm holster reflexively. Voss nodded once, sharp and clean. Ravine lip. Elevation gives us angle. We hold there. They banked hard, the crawler whining as it dove. It touched down roughly atop the ravine's edge, skidding to a stop in a shower of ice and powder rock. The cockpit hissed open. Both men jumped out, weapons drawn, instincts aligned. Voss took the ridge line, set his long rifle on the bipod, and started calling targets. Right flank. Fastest one. On 3. Drex watched the scopes feed. Copy. The countdown was unnecessary. They both fired as one. One flyer dropped. Then another. Then 3 more. Voss's hands moved like clockwork, each round a promise fulfilled. Drex took the strays that slipped past. Short bursts of wings, one lucky shot that ignited a biofuel sack midair. Still they came. Then a roar shattered the sky. A Terran evac cruiser dipped below the clouds. Engines howling, flak cannons rotating into position. It swept low over the ridge, unleashing a barrage that turned the air behind Voss and Drex into a firestorm. The remaining flyers vanished into vapor. The ship hovered, ramp extending. A voice crackled over their comms. Evac window 30 seconds. Move, soldiers. Drex ran, lungs seizing from exertion, boots punching into the snow. Voss followed, last to rise from the defense line. His rifle was still warm as he slung it over his shoulder and sprinted for the ramp. They cleared it just as the cruiser began to ascend. The hatch sealed behind them. Silence. Then the hum of stabilized flight. Voss collapsed into a seat, breathing hard but steady. Drex dropped opposite him, wiping blood from his face with shaking hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Drex looked up and grinned weakly. You really do live up to the myth. Voss shook his head once, a rare smirk tugging at his mouth. Myth didn't drag your ass out of that hive. He leaned back as the stars blurred past the viewport, cold and distant. But next time, let's pick a fight that doesn't start with you being the bait. Drex chuckled, low and ragged. Deal. And beyond them, far below, the hive burned. The wind howled across the frozen surface of Delta 9, a remote moon orbiting the dead planet of Horus Prime. Snow drifted in waves between jagged black stone, and the only sign of life was a faint shimmer of active camouflage breaking the white monotony. Beneath a cluster of twisted, frost-coated alien trees, 2 figures lay prone, motionless except for the slow breath of one man peering through a long-range scope. Staff Sergeant Khan Voss adjusted the reticle a millimeter to the left, compensating for the minor gravitational anomalies native to Delta 9. He exhaled slowly, his breath disappearing into synthetic mesh of his white ghillie suit. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. A body that knew stillness as a weapon. Winds holding steady. 74 clicks north-northwest. Came the whisper in his ear. Corporal Drex Yun was behind him, crouched low behind a data pad linked to a thermal sweep drone orbiting above. His voice held a hint of dry humor, a sound Voss had come to rely on over the years. Atmospheric interference minimal. Target cluster remained static. Voss didn't respond. He didn't need to. Drex had learned that silence was Voss's language. It wasn't coldness. Voss wasn't cruel or dismissive. But when a man's legend is built on killing from distances others can't even see, words become burdens. The galaxy knew him as White Feather, a ghost in the frost, a myth carried by terrified whispers among alien command channels. In a universe crawling with monstrous biotech, plasma cannons, and cybernetic war beasts, Voss still preferred a bolt-action sniper rifle and gravity-calibrated rounds. Because they never saw it coming. Drex tapped at his screen, eyes scanning movement in real time. Looks like we've got activity at grid theta 4. Zarm patrol just rotated. They're cycling shifts. Voss shifted his scope a few degrees and focused. The alien encampment was built like a termite hive, tall and ribbed, slatted in defensive lattice and scanning turrets. The Zarm marauders weren't just pirates anymore. They were organized, brutal, and expanding, and they'd chosen the wrong mining colony to infest. This could be it, Drex muttered. One round through that command node, and their whole operation here collapses. You'll be home before your coffee rations expire. Voss didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Drex knew how to talk to silence. The mission was clear. Eliminate the Zarn field commander, disrupt their deep space relay, and vanish. Command had only greenlit this op because White Feather was leading it. But now, timing mattered. A transport window was closing. They had less than 12 hours before orbital lockdown, and a blizzard was creeping in from the southern range. Voss scanned the alien structures, counting exits, guards, and patterns. Patience. There was always a rhythm to chaos. You just had to be still enough to hear it. I'm going to reposition, Drex said quietly. Get a better line on their northern flank. Give me 10 minutes. Voss flicked his eyes away from the scope long enough to nod once. Drex knew the terrain, had trained under Voss for 5 rotations, trusted him with his life, and Voss trusted him back, more than he'd ever say. Snow muffled Drex's departure, his form vanishing between ridges with practiced grace. Voss returned to his scope, watching the hive, still waiting for the commander to emerge. Minutes passed. Then the shot came, not from Voss. It was sharp, close, and followed by a flurry of shrieks. Voss's instincts kicked in. He turned, fast but without panic. His visor lit up an emergency ping, Drex's beacon, flaring red. Captured. Voss rolled to his side, dragging his rifle behind him as he slid into a new position, heart pounding not from fear, but focus. He activated the drone feed. Static at first, then a burst of garbled audio filtered through. Human caught, unarmed, bind him. Then a new voice, deep guttural and arrogant. Bring him. The sniper will come for him. We'll kill them both and mount their skulls on the comms ray. Voss closed his eyes for a moment. Drex hadn't screamed. That meant he was alive. But time was bleeding fast. The mission had just changed, and extraction was no longer the priority. Through his scope, Voss saw the outline of Drex being dragged into the hive, flanked by 2 Zarn brutes. His face was bloodied, one eye swollen shut. But even then, Drex looked angry. Not afraid. A sharp inhale. Voss zeroed the range. The Zarn didn't know what they'd done. They thought they had taken a tool. They thought the spotter was the strength. They didn't understand the silence or what it hid. They would learn. Voss lowered the scope and slung the rifle across his shoulder. The shadows around him shifted. White Feather was moving, and when he moved, something always died. Drex Ewan's world flickered between haze and pain. His wrists were bound with ion cuffs that pulsed a low-frequency hum into his nerves, numbing the skin. The Zarn hadn't spoken much during the march into their stronghold. Only shoved him through tunnels of chitin and reinforced alloy, the walls pulsing with faint organic heat. Drex had seen this kind of architecture before. Biosynthetic hybrids grown, rather than built. The Marauders were evolving. He was thrown to his knees in the center of a command chamber, the room shaped like the inside of a rib cage. Amber light throbbed from membrane-lined walls, casting long shadows from a half-dozen Zarn warriors hunched in predatory posture. At the far end, seated on a throne made of fused exobone and scorch metals, was Zirek Mal. The warlord's skin glistened obsidian under his carapace armor, his mouth a vertical slash line with flexible mandibles. 2 cybernetic eyes tracked Drex as he struggled upright. When he spoke, his voice rumbled with authority and contempt. Human, speak your name. Drex raised his eyes, blood crusted along his cheek. Corporal Drex Ewan. Terran Recon, 1st Shadow Division. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some of the Marauders hissed. A few tilted their heads in a gesture that might have meant amusement. Zirek Mal remained still. No sniper? He asked. Drex didn't answer. Zirek rose from the throne. He was tall, over 7 feet, and walked with precision that implied experience rather than brute force. He circled Drex slowly, like a predator examining something small, and beneath him, your partner, the one in the frost. Zirek said, "Where is he?" Drex inhaled. His ribs ached. "Wouldn't matter if I told you." One of the guards snarled and slammed a clawed foot into Drex's ribs, sending him sprawling. Zirek made no move to stop it. "I've heard the whispers," the warlord said, crouching beside him. "The ghost sniper, the White Feather. Your kind uses myth to veil weakness." Drex coughed. "Myth? That what your dead scouts said before their brains exploded." The room fell silent. Zirich's mandibles flared once. "You humans," he said, voice tightening, "lean on your reputations like crutches. The feather means nothing. Reputation does not pierce armor. Reputation will not stop me from ripping your skull from its meat and broadcasting your death across 10 systems." Drex chuckled, the sound raw and broken. "You're trying too hard." Zirich stood abruptly. "Take him to the signal spire," he ordered. "Bind him to the facing wall. We'll call out the sniper. He'll watch the corpse of his friend decay. And then, when he shows himself, we'll reduce him to vapor." As the guards dragged Drex away, one of the junior tacticians approached Zirich. He looked hesitant, twitching in the nervous way Zarn youth often did when her instincts warred with hierarchy. "Commander, permission to speak." Zirich turned slowly. "The sniper? This white feather. Records show he eliminated an entire platoon on Varney's Ridge without being seen. He's been linked to 17 confirmed kills at over 2,000 meters. He once shot through a starship viewport during a warp acceleration window." Zirich's tone darkened. "You fear him." "I respect the data." Zirich's gaze lingered. "Then you may live long enough to revise it." Outside, the wind howled again. Within the spire, Drex was chained upright to a twisted pylon that rose from the center of the open platform. He looked out over the valley, snow still drifting in slow arcs. He couldn't see the ridge, but he knew Voss was out there, watching. He'd been there the whole time. That was the thing about Voss. He didn't move unless it mattered. Most people ran toward noise. Voss listened to silence. And then he ended it. They thought they could bait him. They didn't understand what they'd invited. Drex tested the cuffs again. No give. Too strong for raw force. He scanned for tools, nothing but stone and spire. The guards weren't even posted close. Arrogance had made them lazy. He turned his head slightly, angling his right eye toward the horizon. Subtle, barely perceptible. But if Voss was looking through his scope, he'd see it. Their signal, direction, angle. It would be enough. Below, in the hive's outer shell, Zirich stood at the edge of a platform watching the windstorm advance. "Soon," he muttered, "the Terran will show." Another tactician approached, breathless. "Perimeter units have failed to report. Storm interference. Or..." The younger Zarn hesitated. Zirich waved a clawed hand. "The human cannot breach this fortress. Not alone." Far to the north, Khan Voss lay in a new nest dug into the snow, rifle perched on its bipod, scope zeroed to the spire. The distance was long, over 2 kilometers, but he'd made harder shots. What made this one difficult wasn't the wind or the distance. It was Drex. Still, he didn't hesitate. He watched the movement. Drex's eye twitched twice, then again, then a blink. Left side, 2 guards, 17 degrees down. That would be his opening. Voss adjusted his aim. His breath was slow, controlled. This wasn't rage. It was precision. He squeezed the trigger. The first guard's skull exploded in a mist of green and bone. The second turned, too slow. A second round split the space between his mandibles before he could scream. Drex jerked, startled by the suddenness. Then the third shot hit the chain at his wrist, snapped it clean. The cuff shattered. He fell sideways, barely catching himself, and rolled behind the spire's base. Panic surged through the hive. Alarm shrieked. Zirich turned, eyes glowing bright as he bellowed. "Find him!" But it was already too late. The sniper had arrived. Smoke rose from the shattered spire, curling like black veins against the pale sky. Screams echoed to the compound as chaos rippled outward from the sniper's 3 precision shots. The Zarn command structure was cracking, one well-placed fissure, and the foundation trembled. Khan Voss didn't move from his position. Not yet. He lay still, adjusting the rifle's barrel by fractions of a degree. A low beep in his ear signaled the orbital drone was reacquired. The system began feeding real-time heat signatures through his visor. Shapes clustered, scattered, some stationary, others frantic. Perfect. That was a nature of fear. It didn't spread cleanly. It burst and bled, and left leaders scrambling for cohesion. Down at the hive's base, Drex was sprinting through a maintenance corridor, one arm still shackled at the wrist, dragging a length of chain. His breath burned in his lungs. The shots had bought him only a few seconds, but Voss didn't miss, ever. That meant the guards were down, the path was open, and if he moved like hell, he could survive. He skidded into a hatchway, kicking it open with his boot. Fluorescent spores lit the hallways in eerie hues. Drex didn't stop to gawk at the strange organic biofusion that lined every Zarn structure. He was too focused on escape. Every twist and turn had to count. He needed to create enough distance for Voss to start thinning the herd from above. In the command chamber, Zirek Mouse seethed. His mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation, and his cybernetic eyes flickered through targeting matrices. "You told me he wouldn't come," he barked at the technician nearest to him. The subordinate bowed its head. "We underestimated." "No, you measured a man who lives outside metrics." Zirek struck the console with one clawed hand, crushing it. He turned to his elite guards, 20 of the best Zarn shock troops, grown and trained for maximum lethality. "Fan out. Do not shoot the prisoner. He's bait. The sniper will come for him." But the sniper already came, one of them said, eyes flashing with uncertainty. "No," Zirek growled. "That was a message." Outside, Voss began his descent. The long rifle was stowed across his back, replaced now by a silenced magnetic repeater. His ghillie suit fluttered as he moved from snow to stone, blending seamlessly with each surface. Footprints filled in behind him within seconds. Smart fabric camouflage at its finest. But none of that mattered as much as the fact that Voss didn't rely on gear. The gear was an extension. The weapon was part of him. His thoughts flowed through every bolt, every trigger, every breath. He passed 2 patrols before either noticed him. They didn't get the chance to alert anyone. 1 knife, 2 targets. Fast, quiet, efficient. Inside the hive, Drex ducked into a side corridor and stopped to catch his breath. He slumped against the wall, listening for footsteps. They were close now, boots clicking on the resin floor. He looked around. No weapon, just a jagged fragment of steel conway at his feet. Not ideal, but he'd fought with worse. He crouched, held his breath, and waited. 3 Zarn rounded the corner. The first died as Drex slammed the conduit through its throat. The second was on him instantly, claws swiping wide, but Drex twisted low and brought a foot up into its midsection, knocking it off balance. The third lunged forward, just in time to catch a shot through its eye from behind. Drex blinked. Voss stood in the corridor, weapon raised. No words, just motion. He stepped past Drex, dispatching the second alien with a clean, silent double tap. "Good timing," Drex gasped, standing. Voss nodded once and handed him a sidearm. Drex took it gratefully. The safety was already off. They moved together now, fluid, practiced. Years of missions had carved a rhythm between them. Voss moved ahead, always leading, checking corners, scanning vertical surfaces for ambush. Drex watched their 6, counting shadows, listening to the hive's pulse. "Extraction?" Drex asked between steps. Voss paused just long enough to tap a signal transmitter on his wrist. A flicker of data appeared. Red. Still locked down. Window closed. 20 minutes to reset. Drex grimaced. Figures. Behind them, sirens flared again, more desperate this time. The marauders were regrouping. Zirek wouldn't stay passive. Not after being wounded like this. He'd come himself. And he did. At the end of a corridor lined with sinew-fused plating, a heavy blast door groaned open. Zirek Mouse stepped through, flanked by 4 guards wielding shock lances. His eyes locked onto Voss. No fear, no surprise, just cold, vengeful focus. "So," he said, spreading his clawed arms, "you do bleed. Shall we test how much?" Voss didn't reply. He raised a repeater and fired 3 times. The shots ricocheted harmlessly off Zirek's armor. Advanced kinetic weave. Not unexpected. Drex ducked behind a nearby archway as Voss shifted position. "Any ideas?" Drex called. "Split," Voss muttered. They broke right and left simultaneously, forcing the Zarn formation to divide. The moment the guards hesitated, Voss dropped low, slid beneath one's legs, and planted a grenade against its power core. The resulting explosion filled the corridor with smoke and shrieks. Drex used the chaos to flank another, blasting its skull open at close range. He ducked a land strike, rolled under a second, and landed a shot through a guard's knee joint. It collapsed with a scream. Now only Xeric remained. The warlord charged. Voss met him halfway, firing as he moved, aiming for exposed joints. Xeric batted the shots aside with terrifying speed, swinging a two-bladed halberd with inhuman strength. Voss dodged right, letting the weapon carve into the wall behind him. He spun, holstered the repeater, and drew his combat knife. They clashed. Metal sang against chitin. Xeric struck fast, wide arcs meant to overwhelm. Voss stayed low, precise, carving into seams, slipping past brute strength with surgical violence. It wasn't a brawl. It was a duel of discipline against fury, and Voss never lost control. He finally found an opening beneath Xeric's second shoulder joint and drove the blade deep. Xeric howled and reared back, but it was enough. Drex's sidearm barked twice. Xeric staggered, blood pouring from his mandibles. He looked at Voss one last time. You were supposed to be myth. Voss stepped forward, unblinking. Myths don't bury you. Then he pulled the trigger. The warlord collapsed. And still, there was no time to breathe. The hive was waking. The real swarm was coming.